Farewell and adieu to you fair Spanish ladies. Farewell and adieu, you ladies of Spain.
In the industry that is cinema, the overwhelming majority of films are subjectively good or subjectively bad, depending on who you talk to and the taste that they have. Then there's a handful of select films that are objectively terrible. Fuck off somewhere, Snow Brown. Anyway, there's a handful of select films that are objectively terrible and objectively great. So great that they transcended the filmmaking of the time and are just as impactful now as they were back then. One of these objectively great films is Jaws, a horror-turned-action thriller that managed to terrorize entire generations from going anywhere near large bodies of water and paved the way for the modern-day summer blockbuster. But what if I were to tell you that Jaws almost didn't make it to the big screen originally? What if some of the main actors hated one another so much that it actually appeared in the film? What if a young, impressionable director set production back and skyrocketed costs because of his stubborn approach to how the film was made in the first place? What if the original script was so terrible that had it not been changed, you would have been rooting for the giant bloodthirsty shark instead of the insufferably written characters? Well, the thing is, all of those things actually did happen. But in spite of that, the production still prevailed and Jaws went on to cement itself in cinematic history. The fucked up production of Jaws. Let's talk about it.
Say what again? Say what again? Say what again? Say what again?
So our story begins in 1973 with two young producers, Richard Zanuck and David Brown at Universal Pictures, who were given an advance copy of a novel by Peter Benchley titled Jaws. The story, depicting the events surrounding a giant great white shark, was so popular with the two producers that they bought the movie rights to it right away, before the book had even been released to the public, and well, that's where the issues began.
Fuck.
It all started while going through a short list of possible directors shortly after Jaws hit bookshelves, the first being John Sturges, who, well, he pretty much told him to fuck off. Next was Dick Richards, who only spent a short amount of time with the production because he didn't know the difference between a shark and a whale. When recalling the production, Richard Zanuck said he had a discussion with Dick, who started rambling on about how a giant whale attacking a small town was a great idea.
Right.
Because of this moment of brief retardation, Universal decided Dick wasn't right for the job either, and moved on to their third and final choice. A young 26-year-old director coming off a bit of success with his recent film, Sugarland Express, who just so happened to still be under contract at Universal. Of course, I'm talking about Steven Spielberg. With Spielberg now under contract to do Jaws, which he originally tried to void out so that he could jump ship to Fox, in which Universal promptly told him to go fuck himself, a new problem decided to rear its ugly head: the script. See, Peter Benchley ended up submitting 3 different drafts of the screenplay, all of which were struck down by Spielberg because he just didn't fucking like them.
Really?
See, Spielberg wanted the film to focus on the shark, and Benchley's version of the script had too many subplots and just too much shit going on. So Spielberg enlisted the help of playwright Howard Zackler, who agreed to an uncredited rewrite of Benchley's work. And sure, he took care of most of the script's issues, but while making the shark the focal point of it, he made the human characters particularly unlikable.
Not a great plan.
So unlikable that Spielberg thought that the audience would cheer more for the shark. So in a last-ditch effort, he turned to his longtime friend Carl Gottlieb, who was able to rewrite and fix everything to Spielberg's liking. But with pressure from the studio to start production due to the potential strike with the Screen Actors Guild, filming began before the script was even finished, with some scenes being finalized the night before they were shot. Imagine being on set and asking, "So hey guys, what are we filming tomorrow?" It just, nobody has a fucking clue. Casting wasn't a walk in the park either. Paul Newman and Robert Duvall were considered for the role of Brody, but Spielberg didn't want a big-name star attached to the film, eventually arriving to Roy Scheider, a relatively unknown actor who had only done a number of small action productions. As for Quint and Hooper, they weren't cast until a week before production began, with fellow director George Lucas, before he sold his life work and sold to Disney, recommending Richard Dreyfuss for Hooper and Universal themselves backing Robert Shaw for Quint. And well, yeah, Shaw actually hated the book and refused to take the role of Quint until his wife convinced him to.
You serious?
Dreyfuss, however, he was less hesitant. See, he had just gotten done with The Apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz, a film with him in the lead role, and because he thought it would flop at the box office, He signed on to do Jaws before his career went down the shitter. Except it didn't. The Apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz went on to become a massive box office success, propelling Dreyfuss to a new level of Hollywood fame, and he made sure to let everyone know about it every chance he could, especially Robert Shaw. The two actors immediately disliked one another when shooting began, something that turned into a deep personal hatred, with Dreyfuss constantly boasting about his success and Shaw taking every moment he could to bully and belittle him, to the point some of the back and forth between the two characters that made it to the final cut of the film were never in the script to begin with. It was just Shaw being an asshole, and like the absolute legend he is, he'd often show up drunk to filming, and Spielberg just went with it. I mean, fuck it, why not, right? Then there was the biggest issue of them all, Spielberg's ambition, deciding to clash with the open ocean of Martha's Vineyard instead of a controlled Hollywood water environment, which led to a nasty ton of logistical problems, most of them surrounding the shark itself. Universal actually suggested that they train live sharks to work in the production, which, I mean, it's obviously not going to work because they're sharks, they're not whales, dolphins, or fucking dogs.
Well, duh.
So veteran engineer Joe Alves, who was known for his work on the giant squid in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, was enlisted to create animatronics for the film. 3 of them to be exact. 1 attached to an underwater rig that was used for overhead shots, and 2 with opposing sides exposed so they could be filmed from different angles. And well, it was a shit show from the get-go, with the trailer they showed up in almost immediately capsizing and sinking to the bottom of the ocean.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
One of the sharks even nearly killed George Lucas when a practical joke went wrong and the animatronic jaws fell down onto his head. Then there were the mechanical failures, everything from fractures in the frames to their neoprene foam exterior soaking up too much salt water, to even pneumatic hoses corroding and breaking open, sending chemicals out into the ocean. Jesus Christ, man, my last marriage had less problems than this fucking film. Anyway, breakdowns happen so often that the 14-man crew needed to control the animatronics referred to the production as flaws, and it eventually made Spielberg realize that he was going to have to make a shark film, where the shark wasn't even visible for most of the screen time. Something that, in my opinion, benefited the film in the long run. See, the horror was no longer about a giant mechanical shark on the screen. It was the suspense, the tension, the vast ocean, and what lay beneath it.
Lord, I'm having a heart attack! Damn, this is some scary shit!
But fuck me, that wasn't all. There were numerous other issues that arose during the production. You know, like at one point, Gottlieb nearly died when a boat drove over him. Dreyfuss almost drowned while being trapped in an underwater shark cage. And the Orca, the boat most of the film takes place on, began randomly sinking with the main character still on board. Spielberg also had to contend with other vessels entering the film frame, sometimes postponing productions for hours on end, which led to seasickness and sunburns, which rightfully pissed everyone off. All of this combined created such a hazardous and time-consuming environment that shooting took 159 days, nearly 3 times the original goal of 59. With longer days comes bigger money, ballooning the $3.5 million budget allocation to $12 million, making Jaws cost 4 times as much as the average film in 1975. But it was finally finished. And well, the rest is history. Jaws went on to make over $470 million worldwide, which is $2 billion in today's money when adjusted for inflation, and it established the definition of the summer blockbuster. It propelled Steven Spielberg into a new level of stardom. It set a new standard for production and marketing budgets in filmmaking, and it introduced a mainstream fear of going into the ocean. Who could have known that going through numerous directors, numerous writers, having combative actors star alongside each other, watching mechanical sharks break down seemingly every day, all the while working against an unforgiving ocean, would have produced a film that's still loved by people everywhere, even 50 years later. I appreciate y'all for checking out my video. I'll talk to y'all later.